What started as a feel-good celebrity appearance turned into one of the most jaw-dropping, uncomfortable moments in late-night television history. Before we go any further, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment, because what happened between Meghan Markle and Stephen Colbert wasn't just surprising, it was raw, emotional, and left the audience stunned into silence. You think you've seen awkward interviews before? Nothing, and I mean nothing, comes close to this. It began like any other taping of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. The studio was buzzing with anticipation. Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, was making her first solo appearance on the show. Promoting a new charity initiative and recently launched podcast season, the energy was upbeat and optimistic. Stephen, known for his intelligence and affable sarcasm, had prepared for the conversation like any other. Or so it seemed. Backstage, producers made their final checks. Meghan was ushered into the green room, her demeanor calm but composed. Dressed in an understated but elegant outfit, soft cream blouse, black trousers, minimal jewelry, she looked every bit the modern public figure she had become since stepping away from royal duties. A moment before she was called on stage, she took a deep breath and smiled at the assistant producer. "Let's make it a good one," she said. The band played. The audience cheered. Colbert, seated behind his polished desk, cracked a few warm-up jokes and then introduced her with a flourish. "She's an actress, an advocate, a mother, and a royal disruptor in her own right. Please welcome Meghan Markle." Meghan walked out to applause. The crowd, composed mostly of loyal Colbert fans and curious spectators, clapped enthusiastically. She waved, smiled graciously, and sat down across from Stephen. At first, everything seemed normal, almost charmingly so. They started with light banter, talk of California weather, parenting stories, and a few clever jabs about Prince Harry adjusting to American life. Stephen, as always, kept it witty. Meghan laughed, offered a few anecdotes, and played along. But beneath the smiles, tension was building, and neither of them knew just how far it would escalate. The shift came abruptly. Stephen leaned in with his trademark mock seriousness. "Now, Meghan," he began, "you've often said you want to control your own narrative. Which I get, who doesn't? But there are people who say you left one royal institution just to build your own media empire. Thoughts?" The air thickened instantly. Meghan's smile faltered just slightly, enough that only the most observant in the room noticed. "I think." "That's a bit of a mischaracterization," she replied, maintaining her calm. "What I've always wanted is agency. Not control in the manipulative sense, just space to tell my story." Stephen nodded. "I get that, but when you talk about truth, do you think there's ever a point where your truth contradicts someone else's reality? Like, and I say this with all due respect, when members of your own family say what you're saying is exaggerated. Is that still your truth? Or just good PR?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. Meghan blinked, slowly, carefully. For a heartbeat, she said nothing. Then, "I think it's very easy to reduce someone's lived experience to a headline when you haven't walked in their shoes." Stephen leaned back, drumming his fingers on the desk. "Sure, but headlines exist because people say things on record. You've had millions of people listen to your podcast, read your interviews, hear your documentary voiceovers. That's not just sharing. That's shaping public opinion." The exchange was polite, but sharp-edged. The audience, sensing the shift, had gone quiet. The smiles were gone now. Meghan's composure held, but her eyes had narrowed slightly, her posture more guarded. Then Stephen did something unexpected. He pulled out a quote from Meghan's own interview, one from over a year ago, where she had implied that a senior royal questioned the skin tone of her unborn child. This moment, Stephen said, tapping the printed page, was a bombshell. "But you never named the person. Why?" The audience collectively inhaled. Meghan sat up straighter. "Because naming them would have destroyed a relationship permanently." I said what I needed to say without pouring fuel on the fire. But isn't omission a form of control? Stephen pushed. If you tell only part of a story, don't you risk misleading your audience? Silence. And that's when it happened, the crack in the armor. Meghan didn't break down dramatically. She didn't yell or storm off. What she did was far more subtle and, in many ways, far more devastating. Her voice shook slightly as she responded. Do you know what it feels like, Stephen, to be told you're lying about pain that nearly ended your life? The room went dead silent, no punchline, no follow-up jab, just the reality hanging between them. Stephen shifted in his seat. For the first time in the interview, he looked genuinely unsure. The sarcasm faded from his eyes, replaced by something approaching concern or regret. I didn't mean to, he began. But Meghan raised a hand. No, I get it. You're doing your job. You ask the questions that get clicks, that keep people talking. But I didn't come here to fight. I came here because I thought maybe, just maybe, we could have a conversation. Her voice cracked, and for just a moment, she turned away from the camera. A single tear fell, not theatrical, not manipulated, just human. Someone in the crowd called out, "We love you, Meghan." It was a voice of support, but it rang out like a lifeline in a shipwreck. Stephen leaned forward again, now visibly uneasy. Meghan, I'm sorry if I went too far. She nodded, gathering herself. Let's just take a break, she said softly. The producers jumped into motion. Cameras cut. The band began playing over the tension. The screen faded to the familiar blue and yellow graphics of The Late Show, but the damage had been done. What happened next backstage remains a subject of debate. Some insiders claim Meghan left the set early. Others say she returned after the break, but the rest of the interview was heavily edited before airing. What's clear is that the public saw only fragments, a carefully reconstructed version of a conversation that had spiraled far beyond anyone's expectations. Social media exploded. Hashtags trended for days. Debates raged across platforms. Was Colbert out of line? Was Meghan too sensitive? Had late-night TV gone too far? But for those who were in the room that night, it wasn't about sides. It was about witnessing something rare, the raw emotion of a public figure pushed beyond the edge, and a host realizing, perhaps too late, that sometimes the story doesn't need more questions, it needs more grace. The fallout from that tense, unexpected moment on The Late Show didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. If anything, the real story was only just beginning. And if you're watching this and haven't already, hit that subscribe button, because what happened after Meghan Markle wiped away that single tear would send shockwaves through both Hollywood and the palace. It was the kind of aftermath that doesn't just fade with the news cycle, it lingers, festers, and echoes in ways no one saw coming. Backstage, the atmosphere was electric, not with excitement, but with static discomfort. Colbert's staff moved briskly, whispering among themselves. Meghan had been escorted quietly into the green room by a senior producer. Her team gathered around her, speaking in hushed tones. She wasn't crying anymore, at least, not visibly, but her face had that flushed, tight expression of someone holding everything in. Not for the camera now, but for her own dignity. Colbert, meanwhile, remained on set, visibly rattled. He had dealt with controversial moments before, politicians dodging questions, comedians pushing the line, actors giving cryptic answers, but this felt different. This had crossed from entertainment into something more fragile, something human. He paced backstage during the break, checking his notes, talking to a producer with furrowed brows. She's not coming back out, one of the producers confirmed after a minute. We're cutting to a musical guest. You'll need to improvise the closing. Colbert sighed and rubbed his temple. I didn't think I was pushing that hard. But the truth was, he had. And it wasn't just Meghan's team who noticed. Within hours of the show airing, trimmed, edited, softened though it was, social media lit up like wildfire. Clips of the exchange, though not in their raw form, began making the rounds. Viewers analyzed Meghan's body language, the quiver in her voice, Colbert's tone, the questions he chose. The phrase, Stephen Colbert made Meghan cry, began trending worldwide. On Twitter, it was war. Supporters of Meghan rose in furious defense. She came to talk about mental health and charity. She left in tears. Shame on Colbert. On the other side, critics accused her of playing the victim. She's been through worse, they argued. If she can't handle a talk show, maybe she shouldn't be on one. The media pounced. Overnight, major outlets were releasing think pieces. Did Colbert cross the line? Why Meghan Markle's terse matter? Is this the end of gotcha interviews? The opinions were endless, the clicks non-stop. Behind the scenes, Meghan remained mostly silent. Her team refused to comment, issuing only a short statement thanking The Late Show for the opportunity. But within the inner circle, the mood was deeply shaken. She was devastated, one anonymous source from her team would later reveal to a magazine. It wasn't about the questions themselves, it was the tone, the way she was backed into a corner. She didn't expect it. She wasn't ready for it, and it hit something deep. Days later, Colbert opened his show with a monologue that didn't include jokes. For once, he seemed careful, contrite. "Sometimes we get it wrong," he said, eyes scanning the audience. "We try to be funny. We try to be insightful, but sometimes we ask a question and don't realize what it might mean to the person answering it." Last week, I had Meghan Markle on the show. And while I stand by asking tough questions, I regret the impact those questions had. He paused. The audience was silent. This isn't about blame. This is about recognizing that our words have weight, especially when we're sitting behind a desk with a national audience. The apology, if it was one, didn't satisfy everyone. Some called it vague. Others applauded him for humility. But behind closed doors, Meghan wasn't watching. According to a friend, she had taken a few days off from public life entirely. No events, no emails, no statements, just quiet. And in that quiet, the conversation shifted. People began to look at the bigger picture, not just one uncomfortable interview, but a pattern. Women of color, especially Black women, being held to impossible standards. The scrutiny, the double-edged sword of authenticity, the demand for truth, but only if it fits a preferred narrative. Journalists and podcasters began unpacking the moment in earnest. What does it say when a woman who has spoken openly about suicidal thoughts is pressed publicly, on live television, to justify her version of truth? What do we really want from our celebrities? Honesty, or just enough honesty to be palatable? And then, just as the noise reached a peak, Meghan did something no one expected. She recorded a voice note, not a slickly produced podcast episode or curated interview. Just her, speaking candidly into her phone. No music, no edits. Just her voice. "I've spent the last few days thinking about what happened on that show," she said. "And I've realized something. I'm still learning how to be public and private at the same time. I'm still trying to understand when to speak and when to protect my peace. What I do know is that vulnerability doesn't always feel good, but it's still important." She paused, then added, "This wasn't about being right or wrong. This was about feeling seen. And that night, I didn't feel seen, I felt dissected. But I'm okay, and I hope we all learn a little from this." She never named Colbert. Never accused, never blamed. And that, ironically, may have been what changed the narrative again. Her restraint made headlines. "Meghan responds with grace," wrote one outlet. "An emotional masterclass," claimed another. Colbert, reportedly, reached out privately, a phone call. According to someone close to the situation, the conversation was respectful, but not overly warm. Apologies were exchanged. Meghan accepted it, and that was it. But the cultural ripple didn't stop. Producers across the industry began rethinking their approach to interviews. Late-night hosts quietly met with their teams to discuss tone. A few networks even brought in sensitivity consultants. Meghan's tears had, unintentionally, become a catalyst. And Meghan? She returned to her work. A few weeks later, she appeared at a youth empowerment summit in New York. Confident, composed, smiling. When asked during a panel about dealing with criticism, she offered a short but powerful answer. You don't need to fight every battle. Sometimes the best response is just to keep standing. The crowd erupted in applause. If you thought the drama had peaked, think again. Because what unfolded in the days that followed wasn't just fallout from an awkward moment on a talk show. It was a deep unraveling, a full-blown media storm with real consequences, real damage, and real people caught in the crossfire. Before we dive into it all, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because this story is only getting more twisted. The night Meghan Markle walked off the stage of The Late Show left more than an empty guest chair. It left a tear in the fabric of what late-night TV was supposed to be. That tear widened the next morning. The headlines were merciless. Colbert versus the Duchess. Tears on set, Meghan melts down. Woke princess no match for hard questions. The tabloids ran wild. But so did mainstream media, each headline louder than the last, each hot take more divisive. But beneath the noise, something quieter was happening, something more dangerous. Inside the industry, Colbert's team was in crisis mode. The segment had not aired in its entirety. Producers had edited the ending, faded to black sooner than they normally would, cut out the silence that followed Meghan's final response. But the damage had already been done. Someone in the audience had recorded snippets. A mic picked up one of her whispered final words. "This isn't what I signed up for." That one sentence became gospel, reposted, hashtagged, set to dramatic music in TikToks and Reels. It didn't matter what she meant exactly. People projected their own meaning onto it. To some, it was proof she was fragile. To others, it was the ultimate betrayal by a media machine that claimed to protect but only profited. Meanwhile, Meghan stayed silent. No Instagram stories, no media appearances, no leaks. It was as if she had vanished. Behind the scenes, though, her team was working nonstop. Calls were made to PR firms. Advisors were brought in. Crisis managers, the kind used by corporations after scandals, were consulted. Colbert didn't vanish, but he did retreat. His tone the following night was noticeably subdued. The audience still laughed, but it was strained. Even his writers had pared back the sharpness. And while he never mentioned Meghan directly in his monologue, the weight of her absence hung over every word. He looked tired, older somehow. And when a viewer posted a side-by-side photo of Stephen from Monday night versus Tuesday, it went viral, captioned, "One Duchess later." But perhaps the strangest twist came not from either camp, but from an unlikely third party, the British Royal Press Office. For months, they had kept their distance from Meghan's public appearances, issuing no statements and rarely commenting. But 3 days after the episode aired, a spokesperson at Buckingham Palace gave a cryptic quote to a UK newspaper. "We hope everyone in public life is treated with respect and dignity, regardless of past decisions." That was all they said. Just one sentence. But it was more than they'd said in months, and that made it echo. Some interpreted it as a subtle defense of Meghan. Others read it as sarcasm. But either way, the timing was no accident. As outrage boiled online, a second storm was brewing, one with more teeth. Network sponsors started asking questions. A tech giant that had bought multiple ad slots during The Late Show called CBS for clarification. Was this ambush planned? They asked. Was it rehearsed? One firm even threatened to pause its campaign if the show's tone didn't realign with company values. Meanwhile, Meghan's voice note, the one she released quietly, without any corporate filter, continued to spread. It became a symbol, a soundbite that influencers reposted, that educators discussed, that even therapists quoted. "I didn't feel seen, I felt dissected," she'd said. And those words dug into the culture like nails in soft wood. For Meghan, the days following the clash weren't just about public repair, they were about reclaiming space. A small but influential network of women in media reached out privately. One, a major podcast host, offered her a no-questions-barred platform. "No angles," she promised. "Just you and your words." Meghan declined, kindly but firmly. She wasn't ready yet. Instead, she focused on her work, her foundation, her mentorship projects, the documentary she'd been quietly co-producing. And bit by bit, the noise dulled. The conversation began shifting. People weren't just talking about Meghan anymore. They were talking about interview ethics, emotional safety, and how society reacts to women's pain when it's not sanitized. But just when the dust seemed to settle, a new spark caught flame. A leaked memo, sent internally by a mid-level CBS producer, surfaced on a journalist's blog. It detailed how the interview lacked proper pre-interview clearance and described a decision to push boundaries for viewer engagement. One line stood out: "The Markle segment is where we test edge strategy." Edge strategy. That phrase alone caused chaos. It was confirmation to many that the segment hadn't been accidental, that the questions, the pacing, the pressure had all been calculated. The network scrambled to deny it. Colbert himself issued a rare tweet: "I was unaware of any such memo. My interviews are mine. Full stop." But damage had already soaked in. Celebrities and public figures began to cancel their appearances. A prominent actress who had been scheduled to join the show the next week pulled out, citing creative differences. One musician who had pre-recorded a performance demanded it not be aired. And yet, even in the midst of this professional chaos, there were voices whispering something else. That maybe, just maybe, this was bigger than a clash of personalities. That maybe it had touched something deeper in the public consciousness. A wound about race, gender, media, and the fine line between curiosity and cruelty. As Chapter 3 moves forward, the stage is set not just for reputational battles, but ideological ones. What is the role of public figures in a world where media both elevates and destroys? Can authenticity survive entertainment? And who decides what is too sensitive when the stakes are real human emotion? If you're here now, you've already seen how far things spiraled, from a talk show interview to a viral cultural firestorm. But if you think it ends there, you don't know how media works. This isn't just another celebrity headline. It's a mirror being held up to the entire system. So before we go further, do the thing. Subscribe, turn notifications on, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Because what happens next might be the most uncomfortable part of all. What the world witnessed in the days following Meghan Markle's tearful exit from The Late Show wasn't just fallout. It was a fault line cracking wide open across entertainment, culture, and public trust. A moment of rawness had punctured the carefully polished surface of late-night TV, and the ripple effects were impossible to ignore. Stephen Colbert hadn't seen it coming. His staff hadn't either. Not like this. Yes, there were discussions beforehand about tone. Yes, they wanted to go deeper with the Duchess of Sussex. But nobody had predicted the intensity of the reaction. Not in the room, not online, not in the real world. Within hours of the episode airing, social media had fractured into two violently opposed camps. One side defended Meghan fiercely, calling the interview a modern ambush and emotional warfare disguised as journalism. The other mocked her terse, questioned her strength, and claimed she was manipulating the audience. Hashtags trended, comment sections filled. Every frame of the interview was dissected like a crime scene. But the backlash didn't stay on screens. Behind closed doors, producers and executives scrambled. Colbert's long-standing reputation as a thoughtful, even empathetic host was under fire. Some of his closest colleagues expressed concern. One longtime segment director was overheard saying, "That didn't feel like our show. That felt like something else." The fallout was so severe that, for the first time in years, the network held an emergency editorial meeting. Not for ratings, not for scheduling, for ethics. The topic wasn't whether the interview was too harsh, it was whether they had changed. Whether late night, once the haven of satire and smart conversation, had crossed into a new, more dangerous territory. And while that was happening, Meghan was silent. Truly silent. No statements. No social media activity. No leaked quotes. The woman who had once been criticized for oversharing had suddenly gone quiet, and that silence made the noise around her deafening. Speculation filled the vacuum. Some said she was planning legal action. Others said she'd moved to a private retreat in California. One popular theory suggested she'd had a panic attack backstage. No one knew the truth. What few realized was that Meghan was meeting privately with her inner circle. Not publicists or lawyers, but actual friends, mentors, advocates. The people who had seen her off camera, in sweatpants and bare feet, holding her child in one arm and a laptop in the other. She wasn't planning revenge. She was rebuilding herself. Meanwhile, Colbert wrestled with his own response. For all his fame, he had never been in a scandal like this. He'd navigated political tension. He'd been criticized before. But this was different. This was personal. A person had cried, on his stage, because of his questions. And the internet had receipts. 2 days after the episode aired, Colbert finally addressed it, not with his usual sarcasm, not hidden behind a monologue, but directly and without deflection. "I've spent my career walking a line," he said, eyes locked on the camera. "A line between truth and humor. Between asking questions and respecting boundaries. And last night, I crossed that line. I want to say to Meghan Markle, I'm sorry. You didn't deserve to feel cornered, and I never intended to put you there." It was rare to see that kind of public vulnerability on late night. No punchlines. No applause cues. Just a man acknowledging, openly, that he had gotten something wrong. The audience was still. The apology, though unexpected, struck a chord. But not everyone was satisfied. Critics called it performative, said it was strategic, a way to cool off sponsors and stop the bleeding. One journalist even leaked an internal CBS memo allegedly stating that damage control has begun. The memo suggested that Colbert's apology was timed in coordination with marketing teams. Whether that was true or not didn't matter. The public had already made up its mind. And then Meghan responded. Not through a press conference, not on Oprah, but in a 5-minute voice message posted to the website of her nonprofit foundation. Calm, steady, no anger, no accusations. "I'm not here to relive what happened," she said, "but I do want to say one thing to every person who's ever been made to feel small, to feel like their pain was entertainment, or their story was too much. You are not too much. You are not too sensitive. You are allowed to feel." That message hit like thunder. Across social media, people shared their own stories about crying in interviews, about being misrepresented in meetings, about the fine line between curiosity and cruelty. Suddenly, this wasn't just about Meghan, it was about all of us. And for Colbert, it was a turning point. He didn't just go back to work as usual. His next episodes were notably different, more empathetic. He asked more open-ended questions. He interrupted less. In one episode with a young author, he paused mid-interview and said, "Let me ask this in a way that doesn't sound like I'm cornering you." People noticed. Other talk shows noticed too. A quiet wave began sweeping through the industry. Booking agents added new clauses about emotional safety. Some networks started offering pre-interview therapy for guests, optional but available. What happened on that stage had become a case study in how quickly media can hurt and how slowly it sometimes learns. Behind the scenes, Meghan was still processing, still healing, but she wasn't hiding. In fact, she began showing up in unexpected places at a community garden in Compton, helping teenagers plant herbs, at a podcast hosted by two women from Nairobi discussing global storytelling, at a university panel on digital dignity. She didn't mention Colbert, not once. But her presence, quiet, consistent, powerful, became a statement in itself. That she had survived, that she had not disappeared, that she was writing her own narrative now and doing it on her own terms. The final, unexpected moment came 6 months later. Colbert and Meghan were both invited to the same charity gala in New York. No one expected them to interact. The organizers had even arranged separate arrival times. But fate or logistics had other plans. They crossed paths backstage. No cameras, no reporters, just two people face to face for the first time since everything. Colbert extended his hand. Meghan took it. They talked for only 2 minutes, according to a witness, but it was enough. She smiled. He nodded. Whatever was said or not said didn't need to be shared. It was theirs. And maybe that's where the real ending lives. Not in the moment of tears, not in the headlines, not even in the apology, but in that quiet, off-camera exchange. A final human moment. A reminder that behind every story, every meme, every viral video, every tweet storm are people. Flawed, learning, hurting, growing. And in that space, maybe healing becomes possible.